Is it worth thinking about the dead? Is it worth thinking about our ancestors? And why not even commemorate them? See, this is a somewhat of a curious and quirky question and deserves an answer nonetheless. See, the very simple point is we owe our existences to our ancestors, to all our ancestors, because whatever they have done impacted the world in such a way that, well, it kind of led the world to the reality that we have today. If the history would have been slightly different, maybe you would have been born 100 years later, or I don't know, maybe some years earlier. We never know. Every generation has their own reasons to say that their times were the hardest because, well, they have experienced life more than us, right? And typically, older people, especially with abandonment issues, they tend to close themselves, right? They enter their own shell, and it's kind of hard to pull them out, right? So, they will focus a lot on the struggles they've gone through instead of trying to notice the struggles of the new ones that come. Because the world is going to live outside of your existence as well. It lived for billions of years. Now you're going to be here for a bit, and well, one day you're going to go poof, right? So thinking about ancestors, right? Ancestors have been the great ones. Ancestors have been the ones who have been forgotten by history. But from a certain genetic standpoint, from a certain karmic standpoint, each and every one of us that was born came into this world with their own karmic structure. But they also inherited the, let's say, karmic aspect of their parents, of their mother's lineage, and obviously as their father's, genetic lineage. And well, genetics is only a small part of what we can call as karma, right? Evolutionary karma, elemental. There's many types, as of what I heard. So with all these in mind, the point is them having existed, well, they lived a life, they had their own accomplishments, they had their own failures in life, and obviously they had all sorts of things, and well, most likely regrets as well. Everything that they haven't fulfilled in life remained in, or well, was passed on to the next generations. So the point is we also have a lot of those upon us. The reason why the newer generations nowadays find it much easier to see, to spot patterns in, for example, politicians that don't serve us as a society, is because the previous generations have already gone through the suffering, right, of electing people or simply living under people who they haven't even elected and seeing what it is like when authorities don't care about you, right? So they have gone through that. Imagine, for example, the USA 100 years ago, when the corporate media, corporations, and the deceit and lies of their state were beginning to unfold more and more. And as time passed by, televisions came around and the such. The media embraced new means through which it could propagate its deceit, right? So as things grew, right, it was quite an honor at one time that you joined the corporation and you worked for Uncle Sam, right? And then the corporatist world, started draining people, and the first generations still felt like, the first generation still felt as if it was worthy, it was what you had to do, and they kept on deceiving themselves. The next generation was also, in a way, compelled by the previous generation, and in order not to disappoint, they would keep on with the lie. And furthermore and furthermore, these became harder and harder to preserve because the newer generations already had somewhat of the societal disappointments, right? These have been going on for, well, thousands of years if we look at our history as a whole. But from a societal standpoint, from a, let's say, nation standpoint, almost like your ancestors have gone through quite some struggles, whether some have been bloody wars, some have been times of peace and well manipulation, or whatever has happened, right? When we think about our ancestors, we owe it to them, because if it weren't for any one of those, right, if anyone would have gone missing from history, well, history may not have changed at a global level, but who knows? At least the descendants would probably have been slightly different, right? Had someone not done that correct or incorrect marriage. Maybe they have gone through a marriage and it wasn't the right spouse, and they've gone through a lot of abuse, right? And all of that became pains that were recorded, right, in, let's say, their genetics, in their karma. And, well, it was passed down and passed down. And for thousands of years, it has been like this. It became so strong that that's the reason why a lot of people actually find it as their comfort zone, because they also got um abused this life, and combined with the influence of their ancestors back in the times where everything was just abuse, 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 they found comfort in it because to a certain extent they're used to this beyond this current life. See, it is said that the first few years of one's life, they are somewhat free from ancestral influences and all sorts of influences, more or less. Because when you look at children, they don't have much of a worry in the world. But when you look at the same children from the age of 8 and 9, you can see that they have a lot of patterns and they become very quirky, they become hard to control. It's because they are very open to the world. Why do you think the agendas and the propagandas of nowadays seek the younglings? Because the occultists know, the elite people, whatever you want to call them, they know that the adolescence and the period till adolescence, from childhood to adolescence, let's say more like 8, 9 years, 10 years, till like 18, 20 years, those are the most fragile years of one's experience, because that is when all the influences of, let's say, the spirit realm influence them, and especially past influences, not necessarily their previous lifetimes. One has to understand one's previous lifetime may have happened 2000 years ago. You never know when it was. But, well, you can find out with gurus and the such, but you don't know how long ago it was. It does have still a slight influence, but a bigger influence has the new ancestral karma that you have in your current active life. In this life, the ancestors have a different influence, most likely, because it's much later in the time, and also maybe you're born in a different place, a completely different place. So always focus on your current life. Previous lifetimes may have had their lessons. They are still there in your karmic structure. If you're ever ready, well, they will probably unfold to you one way or another. So when it comes to your ancestors, see, they will have quite a big influence on you. They will have a different influence based on how ignorant or how open you are, but also how conscious. Because when someone is conscious, see, someone who's conscious, this means that you're capable to take some pauses in between acting, right? Consciousness is represented by acting, not reacting to ideas. All sorts of ideas pop into your mind. All sorts of things, imaginations, and the such pop into your mind. Some of them you're probably thinking, I would never think something like that normally. But for some reason, that thought came into your mind. It could be from ancestral origin. It can be that you heard it or saw it in some movie or anything. Whatever the reason, right? It came into your mind. So ancestral meaning is very huge. When we look, for example, at the more important people in life, well, let's take, for example, some of the more known religious figures. When you speak about, for example, Jesus from Christianity, maybe let's take also Muhammad from the Islamic culture. When you look at these two people, well, they have passed away a long time ago, but maybe they didn't leave any heritage behind. But for numerous reasons, there are multiple people on the world, millions, if not billions of people in the world, who simply see something in each of the figures, right? Whether they know the actual truth or not, well, every religious writing has been, well, toyed with sooner or later, because ultimately anything that people can believe in, well, it will sooner or later, or it can be shape-shifted so that it, better suits some people's understanding or some people's interests or whatever suited to their interest. Maybe some people are just interested in seeing others suffer. Maybe some people are interested in making money out of someone's belief, because ultimately a belief means accepting something without a necessity for proof. Maybe Jesus never existed. You never know. In this current life, you simply do not know, right? But you simply believe it because your parents have been telling you of that. Your closest friends, your church, Also, many people, because religions, the Abrahamic religions, have become a meta culture. They are something beyond the regional culture of, let's say, a country or a part of a country, right? Because when you speak about Christianity, when you speak about Muslims, there's a lot of them everywhere in the world. These two are very widespread. So if we take such figures into account, a lot of people remind them most likely because of the virtues that were written about them. However, the question is, you probably have never met them. I mean, unless you lived around 2000 years or 13 to 1400 years respectively, well, you definitely did not meet them. All the ideas that you have about them is just some beliefs that you randomly read in a book maybe, or you heard from some people, and especially the writings in the canonical writings of each of the religions, right? And then you have all the saints and other people who had a certain big influence. When you look at all these people, well, honestly, I can't care too much in the end because they have lived their lives. Focusing on someone else other than me is a bit wrong, as of what I may say. Not because, well, it is in a way a disrespect towards me. Yes, I take into account the pros and cons of other people, especially the important people, what they left behind and the such. But focusing too much on others means focusing too much on the outside. And that typically leads to depression because you're leaving your own garden unattended just to seek and, to look at other people's gardens and the such. When you leave yourself unattended for too long, you're not going to know what your potentials are, and you're going to be hired by others to work for less, right? If you find out what your potential is and you find out your worth, then you can really improve on that. And you can end up on the job market with better demands because now you know your worth, you know your potentials. If you are not allowed to learn your potentials by a sick society, well, look at how many people are. They may be great poets, they may be great artists, but they're just working a filthy job for money that probably isn't enough for them to simply exist, right? A lot of people have hobbies or other means of getting at least a bit extra of money so that they can live at least a decent life, right? They wouldn't be working if their hobby would have given them the money they would need, or they wouldn't have an extra thing to do if their job wasn't, first of all, boring, and second of all, giving them way too little money. So all of these trends, don't think that they are typical to this modern world. They have been going on for thousands of years. Because why would you give people, a big reward when many of them can easily settle for less? This has been a trend for thousands of years. Don't think that the corporate world is the main culprit for this. No, we just learned from the mistakes of the past. The problem is you have these mistakes of the past in your DNA, you have them in your karma, but no one teaches you how to observe those. At the same time, you've got your intuition, which is reminding you of these. That's the reason why you're feeling drained, you're feeling bad, you're never feeling good emotions when in most of these toxic environments or any toxic environment. But, well, sick people will always tell you, nope, imagination. It's all imagination, right? Because a lot of like most, if not all, toxic people are highly cerebral. And to cerebral people, intuition doesn't make any sense. It's not something that you can control, right? You can't troll intuition. You cannot control intuition also, right? Because intuition is not something that you simply turn on and use when you want. For most people, it's exactly like that. You can access it through sufficient practice. You can become good at it. But it takes a lot of time, and toxic people always are looking as if they are lacking time. So when we look at such great figures, we owe each of them certain things in the end. Like we owe our lives from one perspective, that if they didn't exist, our lives wouldn't have been probably as good as these. Because think of how many thousands of miserable generations there have been before you. Each and everyone has experienced different layers of the misery of life, right? So you have those somewhat within you. It took humanity so many years to become, knowledgeable of some of the darker corners, right? You've had people live before you that were criminals. You've had people who were murderers. You've had people who were narcissists, you've had people who are maybe pantheists, you've had all sorts of people. And all of their experiences, in a way, shaped the awareness of the people around. And obviously, they also have a certain indirect influence upon you. One has to understand this, one has to comprehend this, because you owing your life to those isn't just related to you having been born, because people have to understand life is not just this physical body and that's it. This physical body doesn't exist on its own. There are billions of forces acting upon it. It's just like the pixel body that you see in a video game. There's so much code for that physical body to do what it is doing, right? Well, physical or not, whatever, it is still, intangible, because you can't touch it in the game with your own hands, unless you can't touch it even in VR because, it's just image overlapping. But ultimately, see, there is a huge amount of code that goes on for that. Now imagine your physical body, which is billion times more complex than, just a set of pixels on the screen. Imagine how much code is running just for your physical body to exist. And all this code exists because other people maintained a certain level of it, right? Even when you touch other people, there's a huge amount of information that is being swapped from your body to theirs, right? A huge amount of karmic exchange. Why do you think men shake hands? Because when you shake hands, you touch the other person, and then you get a bit of a feel of them. Men who are more intuitive, they will get gut feelings, right, about the other people. You definitely don't know them. You've met them the first time, but you already have a certain feeling you can't trust them. Now, if your intuition is not touched by a lot of fake understandings or wounded opinions, as I call them, well, if you kept your intuition somewhat free, it's going to simply guide you well. If not, well, the problem is you're not going to easily distinguish in between your intuition and obviously your imagination. So when it comes to our ancestors, there have always been practices in the older traditions, let's say, that would take care somewhat of the dead people, of the departed ones, because to a certain extent, all of their misaccomplishments, their misfulfillments, everything regarding them has a certain influence on us. It is a reason why we still exist, right? We have their DNA as well. Yes, it is slightly improved, but it is a layer upon a layer upon a layer upon a layer of improvements. The karmic memory exists in there. And, probably it will be surprising for some, but it will seek to live through you. Because if you look at a lot of people, they may say easily that they don't want to live like their parents, they don't want to be like them. But, in time, unfortunately, your parents most likely have trained you indirectly to simply act like them. You see a lot of people now, 30 years later, they kind of talk. They may have a lot of striking similarities with their parents, maybe even behavioral ones, right? You can see that in some animals also. But let's not put animals in here because it's a different type of karmic structure. It's a lot simpler from a certain standpoint. So when we think about this, about life, all of these ancestral influences can have an influence on us, especially on full moons, on new moons, the more ignorant one becomes, and in many other situations, most likely, but especially in the ones I have presented you. So when these things happen, it's like, the ancestors seem to try to live life through us. It's our choice whether we want to live our life fully and embrace it as a whole, or we simply want to live in ignorance and comfort. And, comfort is already the thing that every being in this world seeks. And, you want to expand upon your comfort zone, not live just like most of your ancestors, to simply embrace it as is, right? And simply settle for so little. So it's not like the ancestors are coming and haunting us back. It's just that a piece of them simply exists within each and every one of us. It's not a ghost, it's not anything particular. It's just remains of them. It is karmic imprints, or let's say footage of their existence. Yes, you can call it so. If you're sensitive enough, you can actually perceive how they lived life, but that is preferably not to be experienced by most people because it takes a lot of effort and stability. So I would remind a lot of people, now there are nations, people around the world that they seem to have forgotten that ancestors are important. A lot of nations probably don't put too much importance on the burials, on, the departed ones, because their business with this world has ended, but you as a generation still have their karmic influence upon you. If you don't learn to respect this, if you don't learn how to distance yourself slowly from them, you're going to live the same mistakes. You're going to live and do the same patterns and issues they've had in their life. This is not a punishment. This is not a reward. Karma is not a punishment or a reward. It is just something, a law of the universe, let's say, that exists. And when you exist outside the law, well, suffering can only be your companion, right? So hopefully this video raised a bit of awareness. You're appreciated. Take care. Enjoy life. And this being said, Ferencan Board signing out.